Okay, welcome back to part 2 of the video. On number 8, 9, and 10, we're starting to look at radicals with fractions underneath. So the biggest rule you have to remember is when you have finished simplifying, you cannot have a radical or a square root still on the bottom. So when we get to that situation, we will look at one more step to get rid of it. So let's just start with number 8 together so you can kind of see how it goes. So on number 8, what we really have is the square root of 24 over the square root of 16. The minute I rewrite it like that, it makes it very simple for you to see what to do next. So go ahead at this point and pause your video and finish number 8 and then start it back up for the explanation. Okay, so you probably had no problem getting the square root of 4 times the square root of 6 on top and 4 on bottom. The biggest thing to notice was I still had to simplify my fraction here at the end, and 2 divided by 4 just gave me 2 on bottom. Okay, so on number 9, let's go ahead and what I want you to do is to simplify it as far as you can. When you get to the point where you've got it as simplified as you can, there's still going to be a radical on bottom. At that point, start the video back up and we'll discuss what to do from there. But go ahead and pause your video and get it as simplified as you can in the meantime. Okay, so 256 was a perfect square, and then on the bottom I could make it 25 times 2. So I got it down to 13 over 5 times the square root of 2. But like I told you, we cannot have a radical in the denominator. So what we do at this point is we have to get rid of the radical in the bottom. And the way that we're going to do that is we are going to multiply times the number 1, because if we multiply something times the number 1, it doesn't change the value of the expression. But I'm going to express my number 1 as the radical I need to get rid of, because the square root of 2 divided by the square root of 2 is still the number 1. But now when I multiply it, it's going to help me cancel out these two square roots of 2. So the square root of 2 times the square root of 2 just becomes 2 without a radical. So this becomes 13 times the square root of 2 on top, and then I've got 5 times 2 on bottom, because my square root and square root got rid of the radical sign. So our final answer equals 13 times the square root of 2 over 10. And that's our fully simplified expression. Okay, I want you to do number 10 on your own. Pause the video while you're doing it, and then when you've completed it, check back for the answer. So just check and verify that you got your fraction simplified and that you remembered the plus or minus sign at the beginning. Okay, now 11 through 13, what we're looking at now is they've given us an equation, and they've given us an x squared on one side and a number on the other. So when we want to simplify this for x, what we have to do is we have to take the square root of both sides. The biggest thing for you to remember when we're taking the square root of both sides is that we've got the plus or minus sign is going to end up. So when I say x squared equals 64, if I take the square root of both sides so that I can get what x equals, then what I've got, let's get it moved over, is I've got the square root of x squared and the square root of 64. So the square root of x squared is x equals plus or minus the square root of 64, which is 8. So it's important that you get this idea in your head when we're taking the square root of both sides, that we're going to end up with plus or minus on the number. That's going to help us in our next lesson when we start working with the quadratic formula. Okay, so number 12, you're going to take the square root of both sides. You'll have x on one side, you'll have plus or minus on the other, but you're going to have to go ahead and get that 28 simplified on down. So I want you to do number 12 and 13 on your own. Pause the video, and when you've completed them, check back for the answers. Okay, just double check your answers. Make sure that you got the plus and minus sign in front of them. And then number 14 is our application problem. So it's given us the area of a square is 54 inches squared. So it's saying that our area of a square, so a square is a side times a side, or side squared. So our area is 54. So 54 is our side squared. So when we get around to solving this, we're going to take the square root of both sides. So we got our side equals plus or minus the square root of 54. And now we need to go ahead and start simplifying the plus or minus the square root of 54. So let me go ahead and rewrite it over here. So I got side equals plus or minus the square root. 54 is 9 times 6. So the square root of 9 times the square root of 6 is 3 times the square root of 6. Plus or minus is my side. Now let's talk about reasonable. These are inches. Is it possible to have negative inches? And the answer is no. So in this application situation, we can't have a negative. So our answer is the side length is 3 times the square root of 6. It's in the positive. And that's our answer.